Inspiring interviews with today's top landlords. This is the Rental Income Podcast. And now, Dan Lane.
Gerrit, you and your father formed a partnership to buy rental properties, and one of the things that you started doing pretty early on was calling your dad by his first name whenever you were talking about the rentals. Why do you do that?
I think the reason that kind of came to be was because in the business world, we were partners. Obviously, he's my father. So in the personal settings, that's when I call him, dad. And then in the business setting, if we're meeting with other people, that's when I would call him Chris.
That little mental change makes a big difference to you. So you feel like you're in more of a business relationship than a personal relationship?
Yeah, I guess you could put it that way. And I think it helps us just kind of have a line between personal and professional as well.
Chris and Gerrit have a family partnership, but they really run it like it's a regular partnership. So whether you're looking to buy rentals with a partner in your family or a friend of yours, I think you'll get a lot out of this episode. Joining us on the podcast today from Baraboo, Wisconsin, are Chris and Gerrit Bruni. We'll take a really quick break. We'll come right back and we'll talk to Chris and Gerrit. The first step in buying a rental property is to get pre-qualified. And I would suggest you work with a lender that specializes in working with investors, because the last thing you want to have happen is to get to closing and find out the money's not there and you can't close. The lender that I recommend is Chaley Ridge from Ridge Lending Group. She's a nationwide lender and she'll pre-qualify you for free if you mention Rental Income Podcast. Find out more today. Contact Chaley at ridgelendinggroup.com. That's RIDGE lendinggroup.com. NMLS 42056. Now, Gerrit, let me get your opinion on this. So I've thought about doing a partnership in the past, but what's kind of stopped me from actually moving forward and doing anything is that I feel like I'm really dialed in on what I'm looking for. Like I know the exact neighborhoods I want to buy in. I know the exact type of properties I want to buy in. And I don't feel like I'm really willing to compromise on that. Do you think that I would maybe not be a good candidate for a partnership because I'm so specific? Like, do you feel like you have to have some flexibility to have a successful partnership?
No, I actually don't think you necessarily do. I think that the ideal partnership, each person's bringing something unique to the table, whether that be, hey, I've got a lot of money I want to invest and you're the property expert, so go invest it and we can partner that way. Or maybe one person's really good at fixing properties. It sounds like you're really good at finding the specific neighborhoods that you want to invest in. That's valuable, right? So I think you would just have to find the right partner, Dan, who is going to bring something to the table for you and you're bringing something unique to the table for them.
But to me, and I just want to jump in there and say the key is to have that conversation and to continue to have that conversation so that you do know and can stay on the same page. Because for me, the key in any of this being successful has been that we are constantly communicating on those types of things. We haven't had to encounter this yet because the properties we've been acquiring have all been relatively close to each other. But I totally agree with what Gerrit's saying. You can have different perspectives, and that brings a lot of value as long as you know what those are and lay out some of the ground rules for how you'll interact.
Right. Now, the other thing that stops me from doing a partnership is just thinking, all right, if I'm going to have 10 or 20 properties to reach whatever financial goal I want to hit, if I'm going to have a partner, I've got to have double the amount of properties. So do you ever think that you're having to do a lot more work, that, you're doing things as partners, so you're able to do more. But at the end of the day, like for you guys both to hit financial freedom, you're going to have twice the properties. Like, do you ever think like we're having to do a lot of work to get to where we want to be?
The way that I think about that is that if you've got double the manpower in the partnership, you should be able to do double the deals or bring double the money or whatever it may be. I know in our partnership, obviously, having my dad, Chris, he's brought a lot of knowledge to the table. He's been doing this for a long time. So that was really valuable for us. And We want to all bring money to the table, and that's something that all of us have too. So it's just finding the things that are going to make it grow quicker. And I think that, you can definitely do a lot of deals on your own as well, but you might not be able to scale as quickly. It really just depends on kind of what creative routes you're taking.
Yeah. So what have you guys done? So tell me about your portfolio.
Well, I'll start and again, built a number of properties really on my own. I have today 13 properties that I own by myself in a couple of different entities that are LLCs. And then we have 4 in a partnership that is my two boys, Gerrit and Joe, and my nephew. And then Gerrit and I have a property that we just acquired about 2 weeks ago in another LLC that we just created. So I have one property that I do Airbnb on. That's a cabin that we just bought, I just bought a couple of years ago that my kids do use periodically. I haven't gotten to use it this year because it's been booked all the time. But and then we have the others that are just regular residential rental properties. So today, we're at 19 properties, or I'm part of 19 properties overall. And then these guys have with me. Gerrit has those 5. The other 2 boys have the 4.
So let's talk about your goals. Maybe Gerrit, we can start with you. What are you hoping that the rental properties are going to do for you? Why are you doing this?
For me, there's kind of a monetary reason that I want to do it. And I know a lot of people talk about financial freedom. And so I want to be able to acquire enough property that I know, should anything happen, I could be well taken care of, whether that be not being able to work or something like that, or, choosing not to work if that's what it came down to. And then also what we've been doing is fixing up a lot of properties and making the neighborhoods look a lot nicer. And there's just kind of that side of it too that's always been really positive for me, to have people and neighbors come up and say, wow, this property looks beautiful. It was an eyesore for the last 20 years. You guys have done a good job. So it kind of brings up that side of it and just making it gives me the feel good. So I want to keep doing that as well.
Yeah, that is a great feeling. Chris, so what about you? Do you have a similar type reason for investing?
I would say yes. I definitely am looking at it as an early retirement vehicle. And I'll be honest, even though I started investing about 20 years ago, I didn't really get very active and really start building the portfolio until about 5-6 years ago, when I really kind of caught the bug. I had a lot more free time on my hands at that point, and really enjoyed doing all the fixing up and buying, really dilapidated properties. So that's been extremely rewarding. As Gerrit has said, we get a lot of comments from people in different neighborhoods that we've worked in about properties that we've fixed up. But for me, it is a financial aspect. I do want to retire. This is going to be my early retirement vehicle. And so we are building based on cash flow. And for the boys, bringing them into this entity was to really help build, kind of an empire, if you will, a real estate kind of longevity plan that is something that we can pass on and build for a long period of time. So building up the equity, they've got more years to do that, but I thought get them started early. We start building up the equity. And then I'll have the other real estate investments that I have under my own name that I can fall back on and have that cash flow then to basically replace my income.
Yeah, I was just thinking that as you were saying that you're definitely a lot older than Gerrit, and you guys both have the same goals. So the way that you get there, is it I feel like the way that Gerrit would get to financial independence would be maybe he could take on more risk because he has more time, where with Chris, I mean, you've got a smaller time horizon to reach retirement. So do you find that you're maybe a little bit more conservative? Does that ever come up as a problem, that maybe your strategies or what the risk you're willing to take is maybe a little bit different?
That hasn't come up yet. I think it will down the road as, and again, the partnership with Gerrit and I, he and I have a property together, but he's part of another partnership that my other son, Joe, is in, as well as my nephew, Jesse, their cousin. And we have several properties in that partnership. I think as they all get a lot more experience, again, these guys are all in their 20s, so they're learning. I think their risk tolerance will change, and they'll be much more risk tolerant than I am right now because of my experience and been doing this for so long. I can look at a property and I'm probably willing to take more risk because I can kind of see the future of what it can be, just again based on experience. So right now it hasn't come up. But talk to us again, Dan, another year or two and see how we're doing.
If someone brought a deal or a potential deal to the table for the partnership and not everyone agreed, because it is all equal partnerships. Chris is the managing partner, but at the end of the day, if we don't all agree, that person could go pursue that property on their own. And in a way, it's kind of the reason that, Chris and I did buy that property a couple weeks back, because we saw an opportunity to act quick and knew that was probably the best play. So it's about just having the transparency between the group. I think that's one of the biggest keys. But to answer your question about the different risk levels, I think that's one way you can alleviate that. Instead of saying, shoot, this is our only way we could make this deal work is through the partnership, is that we're all creative. We can find ways to make deals on our own. So even if we don't all agree on something, we can all go our own routes too.
I think that's a great point, that you don't have to 100% do everything together. Yeah, I mean, you can buy something on your own, and the same goes for you too, Chris, right? I mean, if you found a deal on your own, you don't have to do it with Gerrit and your other son. So what about what about problems? Like, have there been any problems that you guys have had to work through, or has everything been pretty smooth?
I would say it's been relatively smooth, although we've got a project that we've been working on now for a year. It's actually a year today that we closed on this property. And it's a very, very old 1890s duplex. For those of you that are familiar with the Baraboo area, it's a Ringling property. So Ringling Brothers Circus had their summer home in Baraboo years and years ago. It's kind of a circus city. So this is a property that was part of that family. And it was really, really a beat up property. We did have a contractor that we were working with early on. And for a number of different reasons, the pandemic related and non-pandemic related, we ended up severing that relationship. So I'm doing a lot of this work, and Gerrit's been extremely helpful in helping me finish off the work that we were doing on this project. But that has caused some consternation, if you will, among the partnership. And I think we have, one of our partners on that project, Jesse, is living in New York. He's not really available to help us on a day-to-day kind of a basis that way. He helps us in other ways. And then my son, Joe, has the job that in the summertime, he's extremely busy and really not available to help us either. I want to say that I didn't start the partnership thinking that it was going to be very equal right away. I really started it so that we could have a mechanism where these guys could learn from me along the way, and then ultimately either go on their own. Gerrit has a couple properties on his own, and or we can continue to build in the partnership, or we could have these other one-off deals where a couple of partners may split off and do a deal. Mm-hmm. I fully expect Gerrit and his brother will do other deals together that I'm not a part of. But this particular project, back to your question, has caused us to spend a lot more time than we had anticipated on this particular project. And since this was an investor deal, we're at the point now that I've got to pay off the investors, which we'll do. But even though we're not quite done yet.
So, Gerrit, how does that make you feel? Like when you're having to put in a lot of work, and your brother is out of town and he's not able to do as much. Like, does that create any animosity?
It's an interesting dynamic, Dan, because at the end of the day, my mindset is, hey, we got to get this project done. So it's kind of all hands on deck. And I think we all realize that not everyone can be all hands on deck with their situations. That being said, I knew that I could be all hands on deck. And even though when we went into this deal, we had full, we were going to have contractors working on it. We weren't going to be doing a bulk of the work. I know that Chris wanted to do some of the work himself, and he made that clear, but he definitely wasn't planning to take this much on, right? So the way I saw it, it was like, well, either I, come in and help, or I don't, and that's just going to prolong the process here. And it's not fair because I know I could help. So that's kind of the way that I looked at it. But yeah, I mean, I definitely didn't love it, spending a lot of my weekends driving to go work on this property. But at the same time, it has allowed me to do some things that I really enjoy, like going and Baird was a beautiful area for cycling and running. So I've gotten to do that and spend time with my family doing that. So I just kind of looked for the positives from it from that standpoint. But the overarching thing was we had to get this project done and keep it going as close to on track as we could.
So, Chris, do you guys have any kind of a written agreement? Like before you guys started doing this, like did you define, hey, if this problem comes up, we're going to do this, or like was anything kind of formalized, or is it all just kind of figuring stuff out as issues come up?
Good question, Dan. We actually have a formal document, a partnership agreement, and I actually have that with anybody that I've partnered with. So Gerrit and I have a separate one for this latest purchase that we just had, but it's formed out of the framework of the one that we first drafted back in 2014. And it has been amended several times. So as things have come up, we have huddled together as partners and said, we need to change the partnership agreement for this or that, or whatever the other reason was. Can I say that it's ironclad and that we've thought of everything? No. The thing that we do, though, is meet on a very regular basis. And I've made sure that we structure meetings to at least gather quarterly. We're doing a lot of them like this, Zoom calls or other mechanisms to do a meeting. I update the financials for the partnership every quarter so that they can see where we stand and are kind of seeing the benefits from the labor. But we have found things that have lended themselves to not being fair for one partner or another. And to the partners' credit, they are all open to those things and have seen some of those things. And I've had to caution them, and Gerrit can attest to this. Don't just take what I say because I'm the father or the uncle and have all this experience. We're equal partners. So even if I say something, I ask for them to push back on it and to express their thoughts, because we are equal partners. We have to treat this that way. And if we want to make a change, I need at least 3 out of the 4 partners in agreement before we can make a change, or to acquire a property. We need to be at least at that 75% level, or we have to turn it away.
Let's talk about the money. So how does it work? Say when you're going to buy a property, are you putting in an equal amount of money, or does that vary depending on the deal?
We are equal partners, so technically we do put in equal money. This last deal that we did as the 4 partners, we did not put in our own money. We did it as an investor deal, and the partners had a choice. You can either go in as an investor or not. Either way, it's the partnership that owns that property. But we did an investor deal, and I want to just remind your listeners that the money is out there. Talk about your real estate and what you're trying to do, and just don't be out there begging for money. Don't ask for it. But it's out there. People want to help, and they'll see that you've got credibility as you do in more and more deals. So our investors are all people that I knew, including a couple of the partners in the project. They decided to invest some of their own money, and as we pay that back, they'll get those things paid back. But what we've done is create a lot of equity. So the partnership didn't have to put any money itself, or the partners, I should say, didn't have to put any of their own money up front on this one. But the first 3 deals we did. We all had to come up with the money and say, we're going to buy this. And, the partnership was brand new. We had to get the money somewhere. So we have done it that way, but our goal is to actually build up our own cash position so that the partnership, when it wants to buy another property, can just dip into the financial reserves we've created. We're trying to not pay out dividends to the partners, at least in these initial couple of years, so that we can do that and get to that point that we're not having to tap any partner to invest their own personal funds when we want to acquire a new property.
So you're basically just building this big cash machine that's generating money. Your rents are coming in, and then you're just reinvesting that money into buying more properties in the future.
That's correct.
That's great. I love it. Now, let's talk about property management. So how do you guys split up the work on the property management?
Well, we do have a guy that works for us that helps out with some of the simpler things, like he takes the calls from the tenants if there's an issue. I wouldn't call him necessarily the property manager, but he's more the property assistant. I tend to serve as the property manager for all of these. So, I've built leases over the years. They're all built out of the standard lease that Wisconsin has approved. But there's things that I've added to that over time. And so I tend to do all the drafting of that. He'll follow up with tenants, get things signed. And anytime we renew, he takes care of a lot of those conversations. But the day-to-day, my furnace doesn't work or I've got a leak here. He takes those calls for us and then communicates back and forth with me if there's something that we need to either contract out or just go and fix. There are things that he'll fix on his own, broken stove, things like that. He'll just take care of. And that's worked out quite well. He's been with us now for about 3 years, and we continue to expand his role. So that has worked out quite well for us. And he gets paid a flat dollar amount for every property that we have under management. So he's got incentive in it. And that also has incentive for him to see us grow, because he knows that as we grow, he'll get more money out of the deal.
It really sounds like you guys have a great partnership. I really appreciate you coming on the show and sharing your story. If anybody wants to reach out to Chris or Gerrit, I've got their email addresses on the website. You can find it at rentalincomepodcast.com/episode 288. I'd like to thank our sponsor for making this episode possible. It's Chaley Ridge from Ridge Lending Group. If Chris and Gerrit inspired you and you're ready to buy your first rental or you want to add to your portfolio, the lender that I recommend is Chaley Ridge. She's a nationwide lender and she specializes in helping investors buy rental properties. She has a ton of different loan programs and she can find something customized to you for your exact situation. If you want to set up a time to talk to Chaley or you want to read more about Ridge Lending, just go to ridgelendinggroup.com. That's RIDGE, lendinggroup.com. If you mention Rental Income Podcast, she will waive all the pre-qualification fees. NMLS 42056. Thank you so much for listening to the podcast. Make sure you subscribe. We put out new interviews every single Tuesday. And if you subscribe, you'll get notified as soon as they come out. My name is Dan Lane, and this has been the Rental Income Podcast.